In March 2024, Graceland was quieter than usual. Not closed, not abandoned, just subdued. The kind of silence that settles into old places when history has already said everything it ever planned to say. Lisa Marie Presley hadn't come to renovate, she came to preserve. Archival work, climate-controlled storage, a routine review of items long boxed, cataloged, and forgotten, or so she believed. Graceland had always been a museum to the world, but to Lisa Marie, it was still a house filled with rooms she avoided, especially one, her father's private bathroom. Not because of superstition, because of memory. Some doors don't need to be locked to stay closed. During a routine inspection behind the mirrored cabinet, part of a humidity assessment, one of the archivists noticed resistance where there shouldn't have been any, a hollow thud behind solid marble. Not structural damage, something else. When the mirror was carefully removed, a shallow cavity revealed itself. Inside were several sealed plastic-wrapped packages, yellowed at the edges but intact. No labels visible at first, just time. When Lisa Marie was called in, she didn't rush. She stood still, as if the room itself had asked her for permission. She recognized the handwriting immediately. She hadn't seen it in decades, but memory doesn't forget its first language. For Lisa Marie. That was all it said on the first envelope. Below it, written smaller, slower, open only after my death. Her breath caught, not because of what it implied, but because of how deliberate it was. These weren't scraps, they weren't forgotten. They were placed, hidden carefully, preserved intentionally. Whatever was inside had waited, for her. The archivist stepped back. No cameras, no phones, no commentary. This wasn't a discovery for history. It was a moment for a daughter. Lisa Marie took the envelopes herself. There were 7 in total. Each one contained a cassette tape, analog, fragile, a medium from a time when voices were recorded not for replay, but for truth. On the spines, handwritten titles, not dramatic, not cryptic, just honest. Things I never said out loud. What fame cost me. For you when you're old enough. Lisa Marie was 56, and suddenly she felt 4 again. She didn't play them at Graceland. She couldn't. Some places echo too loudly. The tapes were transferred to a private audio preservation specialist in Los Angeles. No press, no announcement, just quiet professionalism. The technician warned her gently, magnetic degradation, possible dropouts, voice distortion. She nodded. She wasn't afraid of damage. She was afraid of clarity. A week later, the files were ready, digitized, cleaned, stabilized, the voice intact. On a late evening, alone in her home office, Lisa Marie put on the headphones. She didn't press play immediately. She held the first tape in her hand longer than necessary. She already knew the voice, but this wouldn't be Elvis Presley. This would be the man who whispered bedtime stories, the man whose hugs smelled like cologne and exhaustion, the man the world never stopped watching and never really saw. She pressed play. There was a pause. Tape hiss. Then breathing. Slow. Measured. And then his voice. Not performing, not projecting, just speaking. If you're hearing this, then I did what I couldn't do while I was alive. I stopped pretending. Lisa Marie closed her eyes. He sounded tired. Not sick, not dramatic. Just tired in a way that comes from carrying something too long. He spoke carefully, as if choosing words he'd rehearsed alone. He talked about mornings where he couldn't recognize himself, about smiling because it was expected, about applause feeling further away every year. He didn't mention scandals. He didn't explain headlines. He talked about pressure, silence, isolation. People think being loved by millions means you're never alone, he said. That's not how it works. Lisa Marie felt her chest tighten. This wasn't a confession. It was a release. He spoke about music losing its innocence, about how every note began to feel like a transaction. He spoke about missing normal things, grocery stores, late-night drives, being unknown. I don't think people understand how loud fame is, he said. You can't hear yourself think anymore. The tape ended without drama. No closing line, no goodbye. just the soft click of a machine stopping. Lisa Marie didn't move. She didn't cry yet. She reached for the second tape and stopped. On its spine, a line written smaller than the others, almost hesitant. For Lisa Marie, so you know who your father really was. Her hands trembled, not from shock, from recognition. She had spent her entire life assembling her father from interviews, biographies, documentaries, opinions. Everyone had claimed to know him. Everyone had spoken for him. And now, decades later, he was finally speaking for himself, not to the world, to her. Lisa Marie removed the headphones and sat in silence. She already understood something important. These tapes weren't about rewriting history. They were about correcting a misunderstanding far more personal. Elvis hadn't hidden these recordings to reveal a secret. He had hidden them because no one had ever asked him how he felt. And what he was about to say next, on the second tape, would change not what the world believed about Elvis Presley, but what his daughter believed about the man she lost too soon. Lisa Marie didn't listen to the second tape right away. She waited until morning, not because she needed rest, but because she needed light. Some truths feel heavier in the dark. The file loaded quietly. No dramatic cue, no introduction. Just the soft hiss of analog tape, and a breath taken before words. I don't know how history will remember me, Elvis said, but I know how it felt to live inside it. His voice was steadier this time, less tentative, as if once the first silence had been broken, the rest could finally follow. He spoke about becoming famous before he understood what fame was, about how quickly control slips away when everyone around you starts calling it protection. Schedules filled, choices narrowed, freedom replaced with routine. He described days measured not by meaning, but by obligation. Showtimes, appearances, expectations. At some point, he said, you stop asking what you want because it doesn't matter anymore. Lisa Marie leaned back in her chair, eyes fixed on nothing. She had lived in the shadow of that name her entire life, but she had never considered what it cost to carry it. Elvis talked about crowds that felt endless and conversations that felt empty, about being surrounded by people who knew what he represented, but not who he was. When everyone thinks they know you, he said, they stop listening when you try to explain yourself. He paused often, not from emotion, from thought. This wasn't a man unraveling. This was a man organizing his truth carefully, knowing it might be the last time he could. He spoke about his love for music, how it started as escape and slowly became obligation, how the joy never disappeared entirely, but it grew quieter beneath the noise. Music saved me, he said, but it also kept me in place. Lisa Marie noticed something then. He never blamed anyone. Not the industry, not the audience, not even himself. He spoke as someone trying to be understood, not absolved. He described exhaustion that sleep didn't fix, loneliness that crowds didn't cure, a constant feeling of being observed without being known. I learned how to be what people wanted, he said softly. I never learned how to stop. The tape shifted slightly. A chair creaked. He cleared his throat. There are things I never said out loud, he continued, because saying them would have changed how people looked at me. And once they look at you differently, they don't let you keep what made them love you in the first place. Lisa Marie felt a familiar ache, the unspoken contract between an icon and the world. The everything they need, ask for nothing in return. Elvis spoke about fatherhood next, not directly at first, just fragments. Missing time, missed moments, being present physically but absent emotionally. I was there, he said, but I wasn't always with you. He didn't justify it. He didn't dramatize it. He simply stated it as a fact that had followed him longer than any headline ever could. Lisa Marie swallowed hard. She had memories of him laughing, holding her, lifting her onto her shoulders. She also remembered long absences, promises postponed, goodbyes that came too quickly. Hearing him acknowledge it without excuse felt heavier than denial ever could. I want you to understand something, Elvis said. The world took a lot from me, but the thing I regret most is what it took from you. The tape slowed slightly, the way old recordings sometimes do, stretching syllables just enough to feel intimate. He talked about normalcy, how foreign it had always seemed, how he watched other fathers move through life unnoticed, and wondered what that felt like. "I used to imagine taking you to school," he said, "just standing there, no cameras, no noise, just being your dad." Lisa Marie closed her eyes. That image had lived in her imagination too. He spoke about fear, not of death, but of being misunderstood, of having his struggles reduced to weakness. "People like simple stories," he said. "They don't like complicated people." He worried that history would flatten him, turn him into either a legend or a cautionary tale, never a human being. "If you're listening to this," he said, "then I didn't get the chance to explain myself while I was alive, so I'm doing it now." The tape ended abruptly. No conclusion, just silence. Lisa Marie removed the headphones slowly. Her hands were steady, but her breathing wasn't. She wasn't shocked. She wasn't surprised. She was confronted with the realization that the man she thought she knew had spent his life being edited in real time. She looked at the remaining tapes on her desk, each one heavier than the last. She understood now why he hadn't released these thoughts publicly. They weren't meant to defend him. They were meant to reach someone specific, someone who wouldn't judge him for failing to be a symbol, someone who had only ever wanted him to be present. The third tape sat apart from the others. Its label was different, written slower, more deliberate. For Lisa Marie, my truth as your father.
Lisa Marie didn't press play yet, because she knew once she did, there would be no distance left between the man history remembered and the man she had lost. And what he was about to say next wouldn't just explain his life, it would redefine her own. Lisa Marie waited longer before playing the third tape than she had the others, not because she feared what was on it, but because she sensed it would change the shape of everything that came before. Some truths don't add information, they remove distance. When she finally pressed play, the voice that emerged was different, softer, slower, less careful. "This one is just for you," Elvis said. "Not for history, not for anyone else." There was a pause, not silence, presence. He spoke her name the way he used to, stretching the first syllable slightly, like a habit he never lost. "Lisa Marie," he continued, "I don't know how old you are when you're hearing this, but I hope by now you understand that I loved you in the only way I knew how." He didn't begin with apologies. He began with memory. Tupelo, a small house, a mother who worried constantly, a childhood shaped by instability and longing. "I grew up learning how to survive," he said, "not how to slow down." He explained how quickly everything moved once music entered his life, how momentum replaced reflection, how adulthood arrived without instruction. "I was still trying to figure out who I was," he said, "when the world decided for me." Lisa Marie listened, unmoving. This wasn't a story she had heard before, not in interviews, not in books. It was the story of a man who had never been allowed to finish becoming himself. Elvis spoke about the first time he held her, about the weight of responsibility landing all at once. "I remember thinking," he said, "if I mess this up, I won't just hurt myself, I'll hurt you." His voice tightened slightly, but he didn't stop. "So I did what I always did," he continued. "I kept moving." He spoke about distance, not as abandonment, but as confusion, being pulled in too many directions, wanting to be present and feeling incapable of dividing himself any further. "I knew how to perform," he said. "I didn't know how to rest." He addressed the divorce carefully, without blame, without explanation meant to persuade. "I thought space might protect you," he said. "I thought maybe if I wasn't always there, the noise wouldn't reach you as loudly." Lisa Marie's jaw tightened. She had lived that space. Now she understood the intention behind it, even if the cost remained. Elvis acknowledged his absences plainly. Birthdays missed, moments delayed, conversations postponed until later that never came. "I told myself I'd make it up to you someday," he said. "I didn't realize how quickly someday disappears." The tape crackled briefly, then steadied. He spoke about regret, not as shame, but as clarity that arrived too late. "I don't regret loving you," he said. "I regret not knowing how to show it in ways that lasted." He paused longer this time. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter. "If there's one thing I hope you never doubt," he said, "it's that you were the best thing I ever did." Lisa Marie's eyes filled, but she didn't wipe them away. He talked about legacy next. Not awards, not records, but what remains after the noise fades. People will argue about my music, he said. They'll argue about my choices, but none of that matters compared to whether you felt loved. He worried that she would grow up hearing other people explain him to her, that strangers would fill in the gaps he left behind. I wanted you to have my words, he said, not theirs. He admitted fear, not of dying, but of being frozen in time, of never being allowed to grow beyond the version the world preferred. I was changing, he said, but I don't think anyone wanted me to. His voice softened again near the end. If I'm not there when you need me, he said, I hope you remember me as someone who tried, someone who didn't always succeed, but never stopped caring. The tape ended quietly. No final message, no dramatic farewell, just the sound of the recorder clicking off. Lisa Marie sat in the stillness that followed. She felt older than she had an hour before. Not burdened, expanded. The man on the tape hadn't tried to explain away his failures. He hadn't asked for forgiveness. He had simply offered context, and in doing so, he had given her something she hadn't realized she'd been missing. Not answers, but permission. Permission to see him as human. The fourth tape remained. Its label was different from the rest. Short, almost restrained. What I hope you understand. Lisa Marie reached for it, aware that once she did, there would be no space left between memory and truth. And whatever he had saved for last wouldn't just close the story he was telling. It would decide how it ended. Lisa Marie didn't wait this time. She already knew the weight of the last tape wouldn't lessen by delay. Some endings don't ask to be prepared for. They simply arrive. She pressed play. There was no preamble, no clearing of the throat. Just his voice, steady in a way that suggested acceptance rather than certainty. If this is the last thing you hear from me, Elvis said, then I want it to be clear. He spoke slowly, as if each word was being placed carefully where it belonged. I didn't live the life people think I lived, he continued, and I didn't feel the way they think I felt. He wasn't correcting facts, he was correcting assumptions. He talked about happiness, not as something he lacked, but something that came in moments rather than permanence. Quiet mornings, late-night songs played without purpose, small pockets of peace that existed outside of attention. Those were the times I felt most like myself, he said, not when everyone was watching. Lisa Marie listened without moving. He spoke about the difference between being admired and being understood, about how the two are often confused. I was admired by millions, he said, but understood by very few. He paused, then added, you were one of them, even when you were too young to know it. His voice softened again. He spoke about hope, not grand hope, personal hope, that she would live without shrinking herself to meet expectations, that she would choose honesty over approval. Don't let anyone turn you into something you're not, he said. It's harder to get back than people tell you. He acknowledged his imperfections plainly. No dramatics, no defense. I made choices that hurt people, he said. Some of them hurt you. I live with that. But then he added something quieter. I also made choices because I was afraid, and fear can look like a lot of things from the outside. He didn't ask to be excused. He asked to be understood. Elvis spoke about time next, how strange it felt knowing his might be limited, even if he didn't know when or how.
You start thinking about what matters, he said, and most of what the world cares about doesn't make the list. He returned again and again to one idea: love as presence, not performance. If there's one thing I want you to remember, he said, it's that I was never more myself than when I was with you, and no one else was around. Near the end, his voice changed, not with sadness, but with resolve. I don't need to be remembered as perfect, he said. I don't even need to be remembered as great. There was a brief pause. I just want to be remembered as real. The tape clicked off. Lisa Marie didn't remove the headphones right away. She let the silence sit where his voice had been. It felt earned. When she finally did, the room felt different. Not lighter, clearer. She understood now why he had hidden these tapes instead of speaking publicly. The world would have argued with him. She didn't need to. These recordings didn't change the facts of his life. They changed the meaning of them. Elvis Presley didn't disappear into history without explanation. He left one. Quietly, carefully, for the only person who needed it. History would continue to debate his legacy. Critics would keep analyzing the myth. But somewhere beyond the noise, a daughter finally heard her father finish a sentence he'd been interrupted in for decades. And that, more than any revelation, was what changed everything we thought we knew. After the last tape ended, Lisa Marie didn't stand up. She didn't move the chair back. She didn't reach for her phone. She stayed exactly where she was, as if motion itself might disturb something fragile that had finally settled into place. The room felt fuller than before, not with sound, but with presence. It was the kind of silence that only arrives after something important has been said completely. She realized then that for the first time in her life, there was nothing left to guess. No missing context. No unanswered tone. Her father had finished speaking. Not abruptly. Not dramatically. But fully. Lisa Marie thought about how many years she had spent listening to other people explain him. Journalists. Biographers. Fans. Critics. Everyone had a version. Everyone had an angle. Some painted him as a myth too large to be human. Others reduced him to his weakest moments. None of them sounded like the voice she had just heard. That voice wasn't defensive. It wasn't performative. It didn't ask for sympathy. It simply existed. And in doing so, it reframed decades of noise. She walked through the house slowly, almost carefully, as if carrying something fragile inside her. Photographs lined the walls. Images she had seen her entire life. Elvis smiling on stage. Elvis waving to crowds. Elvis frozen mid-performance. Immortalized at his loudest. She stopped in front of one photograph she had always passed without thinking. It was small. Easy to miss. Elvis sitting on the floor. Legs crossed. Lisa Marie in his lap. No audience. No spotlight. Just a moment. She saw it differently now. Not as a memory of what was lost, but as proof of what existed. The tapes hadn't revealed a different man. They revealed the same man, just uninterrupted. Lisa Marie understood something else then. Her father hadn't been trying to correct history. He knew better than anyone how resistant it was to change. He had been trying to leave something intact, a version of himself untouched by interpretation, untouched by expectation.
Untouched by anyone else's need to define him. She thought about how carefully he had chosen his words, how little blame there was in them, how restrained the emotion had been. That wasn't weakness, that was intention. He had wanted his truth to be heard, not argued with. The next morning, Lisa Marie met with her mother. They didn't start by talking about the tapes. They talked about ordinary things, coffee, schedules. Silence stretched between them comfortably, until it didn't. Then Lisa Marie spoke. Not about what Elvis had said, but about how he sounded. He wasn't angry, she said quietly. Priscilla noted. He never really was, she replied. They listened together again. Not all of it, just fragments, certain passages, moments that felt necessary to hear twice. Priscilla closed her eyes when his voice filled the room, not because it hurt, but because it confirmed something she had always known but never been able to prove, that the man the world demanded and the man she loved were never the same person. Lisa Marie noticed something during that second listening, the pauses, the spaces between his sentences. He wasn't rushing. He wasn't afraid of silence. It was as if he had finally allowed himself to slow down, to exist without urgency. That realization stayed with her longer than any single sentence. She thought about legacy again, not as inheritance, but as emotional residue. What a person leaves behind in the people who knew them closely enough to be changed. The tapes hadn't given her closure in the traditional sense. They hadn't wrapped anything up neatly. They had done something more difficult. They had made room. Room for contradiction. Room for forgiveness without forgetting. Room for love without idealization. Lisa Marie realized that much of her life had been shaped by absence. Not just his physical absence,
but the absence of his voice explaining itself. That absence had been filled by speculation, by stories told too loudly and repeated too often. Now, that space was occupied by something else. Not certainty, but understanding. She didn't feel the need to share the tapes publicly. Not yet. Not maybe ever. They weren't evidence. They weren't statements. They were conversations that had waited decades to happen. Conversations that didn't need an audience. She understood now why he had waited, why he had hidden them instead of releasing them. Because the world listens to react. A daughter listens to understand. That night, Lisa Marie wrote something down for herself. Not for publication, not for explanation. Just a sentence she didn't want to forget. He wasn't trying to be remembered. He was trying to be known. And that distinction changed everything. The story of Elvis Presley would continue the way all public stories do. Fragmented, debated, reshaped by each generation. But somewhere outside that noise, something quieter had taken place. A man had finally finished speaking, and the person he was speaking to had finally been old enough to hear him. In the weeks that followed, Lisa Marie noticed something subtle begin to change. Not the world, not the headlines, herself. The tapes didn't sit in her mind like answers. They moved through her like a presence that no longer needed to announce itself. For the first time, her memories of her father were no longer interrupted by other people's interpretations. When she thought of him now, she didn't hear commentators or critics. She heard his pauses, his careful phrasing.
The way he spoke as if time finally belonged to him. It was strange how something recorded decades earlier could feel more alive than anything preserved in public record. She understood then that history isn't shaped only by what is remembered, but by what is repeated. And her father had been repeated endlessly, but rarely listened to. The tapes hadn't changed facts, they changed tone. And tone, she realized, was where truth often hid. Lisa Marie began revisiting moments from her own life with new context. Conversations she once thought were incomplete now felt intentional. Silences that had hurt before now carried meaning. She remembered how he would look at her sometimes without speaking, as if trying to memorize something he knew he wouldn't have long to keep. At the time, she had felt overlooked. Now she recognized presence. Not perfect presence, but real. She thought about how much of her life had been shaped by other people asking questions she couldn't answer. What was he really like? Was he happy? Did he regret it all? For years, she had carried those questions like expectations she was supposed to satisfy. The tapes lifted that weight. They weren't explanations meant for strangers. They were confirmations meant for her. And that distinction mattered more than she had ever understood. She didn't rush to tell anyone about the recordings, not out of secrecy, out of respect. Some things lose their meaning when they're turned into content. She had spent her entire life watching her father's most personal moments become public property. She refused to let his quietest truth meet the same fate too quickly. Instead, she listened again, not from beginning to end, just pieces, certain sentences, the way he said her name, the way he described ordinary dreams with extraordinary longing. Each time, something different surfaced, not revelation, recognition. She realized that her father hadn't been trying to control how he was remembered. He had accepted long ago that he couldn't. What he wanted was simpler and harder. He wanted someone to know him without needing him to be anything else. That knowledge changed how she carried his legacy. It became less about preservation and more about permission. Permission to let him be complicated. Permission to let him be unfinished. Permission to let him be human without apology. Lisa Marie also noticed how the world around Elvis had continued to move in predictable patterns. Anniversary tributes, documentaries, debates. None of it stopped, none of it slowed. But it no longer felt like something she had to correct or participate in. The tapes had given her a private anchor, a place to return when public narratives felt too loud. She understood then that closure doesn't come from resolving questions. It comes from knowing which questions no longer need answers. Her father had answered the only one that mattered, not with facts, with honesty. As time passed, the recordings stopped feeling like artifacts and started feeling like conversations that had finally reached their destination. She didn't imagine him differently now. She imagined him more clearly. A man who carried success without ever fully belonging to it. A man who loved deeply but struggled with how to remain present. A man who understood too late that silence can protect,
but it can also separate. None of that diminished him. If anything, it grounded him. She thought about how often people confuse legacy with permanence.
How they assume being remembered loudly means being understood. Her father's voice on those tapes suggested the opposite, that being understood quietly by even one person might be enough. One evening, long after the recordings had been secured again, Lisa Marie sat alone and listened to the first few seconds of the very first tape. Just the breath before he spoke. She realized that breath carried more truth than most of what had been written about him in decades. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't tragic. It was human. And that humanity had survived everything else. The story of Elvis Presley would never settle into a single version. It wasn't meant to. But somewhere beneath the layers of myth and memory, something steady now existed. A voice, preserved not to shock or reveal, but to be heard by the person who needed it most. That voice didn't ask to be defended. It didn't ask to be forgiven. It asked to be understood. And finally, it was. What changed everything wasn't what the tapes revealed. It was what they removed. The distance, the noise, the need to speculate. In the end, Elvis Presley didn't leave behind a secret. He left behind clarity, quietly, carefully, and for the first time since his voice first echoed across a stage, it wasn't competing with applause. It was simply heard.